I have a relative who was, and in a sense still is, the black sheep of the family. Ever since he was a teenager, he was always getting into terrible trouble. He drinks heavily, he kept getting into fights. He kept doing things that he really ought not to get into. During the early days, his family was always there for him, hoping that he would change his ways. But he didn't show any signs of changing for a long time. This person is now in his middle age. He's mellowed down a bit, but traces of his old ways are still there. Now, the sad thing is that his family had given up on him. This guy feels a deep sense of rejection for being abandoned by his family. All of us probably know somebody who's like this relative of mine, someone who keeps committing the same set of mistakes and offenses over and over again. A husband who's always flirting with other women. A wife who's always verbally abusive. A son who keeps coming home drunk, or a daughter who is always lying. A friend who keeps talking behind your back. The first time we suffer an offense, we can easily forgive. The second time, we're still okay. But the third time, the fourth, the fifth, sixth, seventh, 70th time, boy, that's way too much, right? Or is it? And I ask myself, is there really a point when you give up on a person? When someone keeps doing shameful, hurtful things to other people, is there really a point when people can say, enough, tama na, sobra na, hindi ko na siya mapapatawad pa? I think this is precisely what the disciple Peter had in mind when he asked his master Jesus a question about forgiveness. We find this in the Gospel according to Matthew. Then Peter came up and said to him, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? As many as 7 times? Jesus said to him, I do not say to you 7 times, but 70 times 7. You multiply 70 by 7, and you will get 490. If a person offends us 491 times, are we justified in not forgiving that person anymore? You know, Peter probably thought that forgiving 7 times is enough. Beyond that, the person is a hopeless case. And for Peter, that was already a benevolent gesture, because the Jewish rabbis of his time taught that one ought to forgive up to a certain number of times. And they cite scripture saying, God forgave Israel's enemies 3 times before punishing them. So perhaps if we double that number, 3 times 2, if we forgive a person 6 times, we're perfectly justified not to forgive the next time around. So what Jesus said was astounding. He gave the number 70 times 7. Jesus didn't really mean that we put a limit at 490. What he was saying was that for all practical purposes, the number of times he ought to forgive is beyond counting. If a person keeps offending us over and over, we are to forgive him over and over as well, without limit. This is about unlimited forgiveness. So, if someone offends us more than once, twice, 7 times, even 70 times 7, or 490 times, and even beyond that, if we want to follow Jesus, we are called by God to forgive. After all, we're just like everyone else, even the one who keeps offending us. We all depend on the abounding mercy and limitless forgiveness of God. As we learn to forgive others 70 times 7 times, and even beyond, always keep in mind, faith matters too.